The pen trembled in Officer Patricia Henderson's gloved hand as she scribbled the citation number across the yellow slip, her eyes darting between the laughing children and the speakers pumping out rhythmic beats. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Willowbrook Community Park, where three black families had spread colorful blankets beneath towering oak trees, their joy infectious as they celebrated 8-year-old Marcus Johnson's birthday. But Henderson saw something else entirely, a violation that demanded immediate action. "Excuse me. You need to turn that music off right now," she announced, her voice cutting through the celebration like a blade. The families turned toward her, confusion replacing their smiles as they noticed the official HOA security badge gleaming on her uniform. "You're violating City Ordinance 47B regarding excessive noise levels in public spaces." Marcus's mother, Denise Johnson, stood slowly from her folding chair, her hands instinctively moving to smooth her son's hair as he pressed closer to her legs. "I'm sorry. What ordinance? We're just having a birthday party. The music isn't even that loud." She gestured toward the small Bluetooth speaker sitting on the picnic table, its volume barely audible above the children's laughter. Henderson's partner, a stocky man named Rodriguez, emerged from behind the massive barbecue grill where Marcus's father, David, was flipping burgers. "We've received multiple complaints about this gathering," Rodriguez stated, pulling out his own citation book. "Noise violations, unauthorized assembly, and potential permit violations." The word unauthorized hung in the air like smoke from the grill. David Johnson set down his spatula and walked over to join his wife, his jaw tightening as he processed what was happening. "Multiple complaints, from who we've been here for less than 2 hours, and we reserved this pavilion through the proper channels." Margaret Williams, Marcus's grandmother, rose from her lawn chair with the dignity of someone who had weathered many storms. At 73, she had witnessed the civil rights movement firsthand, marched with leaders, and thought those days of blatant discrimination were behind them. "Officers, these children are celebrating a birthday. We have every right to be here. Show me the complaints." Henderson's eyes flashed with irritation. "We don't have to show you anything, ma'am. We're here to enforce the rules that keep this community safe and peaceful for everyone." She continued writing, her pen pressing harder against the paper with each word. "The fine for noise violation is $250, and unauthorized assembly carries an additional $100 penalty." The celebration ground to a halt. Children stopped playing, their eyes wide with confusion as they sensed the tension radiating from the adults. Marcus clutched his new basketball, the gift he'd been so excited to show his friends now forgotten in his small hands. His cousin, 10-year-old Asia, moved closer to her mother, Shayla Williams, who had been documenting the party on her phone. "This is ridiculous," Shayla said, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. "You can't just come here and harass us for having a family gathering. We're not breaking any laws." She held up her phone, continuing to record. "And I'm documenting everything." Rodriguez stepped forward, his hand moving to his radio. "Ma'am, you need to put that phone away. Recording security personnel without consent is perfectly legal in a public space," interrupted Marcus's uncle, Jerome Williams, a paralegal who had been quietly observing the interaction. He moved to stand beside his family, his presence both calming and formidable. "Officer, I'm familiar with municipal codes. There's no noise ordinance violation here, and this is a public park. We have every right to be here." Henderson's face flushed red. "Sir, we're not here to debate the law with you. We're here to enforce it. The citations are being issued, and you can challenge them in court if you feel they're unjust." She tore off the first citation and held it toward Denise. This is your warning to disperse immediately." The cruelty of the moment wasn't lost on any of them. A child's 8th birthday party, innocent and joyful, was being criminalized before their eyes. The other families at the park, mostly white, continued their own gatherings unbothered, their music and laughter creating a stark contrast to the harassment the Johnson and Williams families were experiencing. David Johnson's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained controlled. "You're targeting us because we're black. Plain and simple. There are 3 other parties going on right now, and you're not citing them." "That's a serious accusation," Henderson replied, her tone defensive. "We respond to complaints as they come in. The color of your skin has nothing to do with this." But even as she spoke, her eyes avoided direct contact with any of the family members. Margaret Williams stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. "Child, I've been alive long enough to recognize discrimination when I see it. You're not fooling anyone with your official procedures and complaint stories. This is harassment, pure and simple." The officers continued their citation writing, undeterred by the family's protests. Henderson issued tickets to Denise Johnson for noise violation and failure to comply with park regulations. Rodriguez targeted David Johnson with citations for unauthorized assembly and creating a public disturbance. The fines totaled over $600 between the 2 families. As the officers prepared to leave, Henderson turned back one final time. "You have 30 days to pay these fines or contest them in municipal court. Failure to do so will result in additional penalties." She walked away, her partner following, leaving the families standing in stunned silence. Marcus looked up at his father, his young face creased with worry. "Daddy, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong?" David knelt down to his son's level, his voice gentle despite the rage burning in his chest. "No, son, we didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and we have to work together to fix them." He glanced at the citations in his hand, then at his extended family gathering around them. "But right now, we're going to finish celebrating your birthday." The party resumed, but the joy had been tainted. Parents spoke in hushed tones while children played with less enthusiasm than before. The music remained off, the silence serving as a reminder of the injustice they had just experienced. As the afternoon wore on, other park visitors began to notice the unusual quiet from the Johnson-Williams gathering, some approaching to ask if everything was okay. Mrs. Chen, an elderly Asian woman who regularly walked her small dog through the park, stopped by their table. "I saw what happened with those officers," she said quietly to Margaret. "That wasn't right. If you need someone to speak up about what they did, I'll help." Her words sparked something in Margaret's heart. "Thank you, dear. We might just take you up on that offer." She looked around at her family, seeing the determination growing in their eyes. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. As the sun began to set, the families packed up their belongings with heavy hearts. Marcus carried his basketball, no longer excited about the games he'd planned to play. Asia helped her grandmother fold the blankets, her young mind processing the unfairness of what she'd witnessed. The adults exchanged phone numbers with Mrs. Chen and several other witnesses who had stepped forward to offer their support. That evening, the Johnson and Williams families gathered at Margaret's house, their dining room table covered with the citations, park reservation confirmations, and Jerome's legal research. The atmosphere was tense but focused, each family member contributing their perspective on what had happened and what needed to be done next. "We can't let this slide," Jerome declared, his paralegal training evident in his organized approach. "These citations are baseless, and the officer's behavior was clearly discriminatory. We need to file complaints with the city and contest these charges in court." Denise nodded, still feeling the sting of humiliation from the afternoon. But it's not just about the money. It's about the message this sends to our children, to our community. If we don't fight back, they'll think they can target any black family enjoying a public space. Shayla pulled out her phone, reviewing the video footage she'd captured. "I got most of it on camera. The officers' faces, their badge numbers, everything they said. This could be crucial evidence." Margaret listened to her family's determination with pride swelling in her chest. "In my day, we didn't have cameras and social media to document these things. We had to rely on witnesses and word of mouth. You all have tools I never had." She paused, her voice becoming steely. "But we also had something else, unity. We stood together, and we didn't back down." The next morning, Jerome arrived at the municipal courthouse early, armed with research and determination. The clerk at the filing window, a middle-aged black woman named Patricia, looked up as he approached with his stack of papers. "Good morning. I need to file a formal complaint and contest these citations," Jerome said, sliding the yellow tickets across the counter. Patricia examined the citations, her eyebrows rising as she read the details. "Noise violation at Willowbrook Park. What time was this issued?" 3:30 in the afternoon. During a child's birthday party?" She shook her head slowly. "Honey, I've been working here for 15 years, and I've never seen a noise citation issued at 3:30 in the afternoon for a family gathering. Those usually come from late-night parties or construction violations." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Who were the issuing officers?" "Henderson and Rodriguez from HOA Security." Patricia's expression darkened. "Those two have been busy lately. You're the fourth family this month to contest citations from them, all for similar violations, all from the same park." She pulled out a filing form. "Fill this out completely, and make sure you check the box requesting a hearing. Judge Martinez handles these cases, and he doesn't tolerate discrimination." As Jerome filled out the paperwork, Patricia continued talking. "You might want to contact the other families who've been cited. There's strength in numbers, and if there's a pattern of discrimination, the judge will want to know about it." The information about other families sparked a fire in Jerome's mind. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a systematic pattern of harassment. He thanked Patricia and immediately called his sister-in-law on his way to the parking lot. "Denise, we need to find the other families Patricia mentioned. This is bigger than just us." The search for other affected families led them through social media, community centers, and word-of-mouth networks. Within a week, they had connected with 3 other black families who had received similar citations from Henderson and Rodriguez. The Thompson family had been cited for loitering while their children played on the playground. The Davis family received tickets for unauthorized food preparation during a family reunion. The Martinez family, ironically sharing a surname with the judge, had been fined for excessive vehicle parking during a graduation celebration. Each story followed the same pattern: officers arriving during family gatherings, citing obscure ordinances, and issuing substantial fines. None of the families had witnessed white families receiving similar treatment for identical activities. The discrimination was becoming undeniable. Margaret Williams took charge of organizing the affected families, her natural leadership shining through. "We need to meet together, share our stories, and prepare for court as a united front," she told the group during their first gathering at the community center. "These officers are counting on us to pay the fines quietly and move on. They don't expect us to fight back." The community center buzzed with energy as families shared their experiences. Children played in the corner, while parents and grandparents strategized. Marcus Johnson, now understanding that his birthday party had been part of something much larger, approached his grandmother with a serious expression. "Grandma Maggie, why don't those officers like us?" Margaret knelt down to his level, choosing her words carefully. "Baby, it's not about liking or not liking. Some people have ideas in their heads about who belongs where, and they use their authority to push those ideas. But we're going to show them that everyone belongs in public spaces, regardless of what they look like." As the court date approached, the families prepared meticulously. Jerome coordinated with a civil rights attorney, Maria Santos, who agreed to represent them pro bono. Santos, a Latina woman with a reputation for taking on discrimination cases, was immediately intrigued by the pattern of citations. "This is textbook selective enforcement," Santos explained during their first meeting. "The officers are using legitimate ordinances as weapons to target specific communities. We need to prove that their enforcement is discriminatory rather than fair and equal." The preparation involved gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and documenting the differences in treatment between families. Mrs. Chen proved invaluable, providing detailed accounts of what she had observed during her daily walks through the park. Several other regular park visitors came forward with similar testimonies. One particularly damning piece of evidence came from the park's reservation system. Jerome discovered that on the same day as Marcus's birthday party, 3 other groups had reserved pavilions. All had music, all had children playing, and all had lasted similar lengths of time. Only the Johnson-Williams families had been cited. The night before the court hearing, Margaret sat in her kitchen, reviewing the stack of evidence they had compiled. Photographs, witness statements, video footage, and documentation of the discriminatory pattern filled several folders. Her granddaughter Asia sat beside her, helping organize the papers. "Grandma, do you think we'll win tomorrow?" Margaret looked at the young girl's hopeful face, remembering her own childhood during the civil rights era. "Baby, winning isn't just about what happens in that courtroom tomorrow. It's about standing up for what's right, showing these officers that they can't target our families without consequences, and teaching you and Marcus that you have the power to fight injustice." The morning of the hearing, Municipal Court Judge Carlos Martinez reviewed the case files with growing concern. The pattern of citations issued by Henderson and Rodriguez was impossible to ignore. As families filled the courtroom, he noticed the diversity of faces, Black, Asian, and white community members all there to support the affected families. Henderson and Rodriguez sat at the prosecution table with their HOA legal representative, clearly confident in their position. They had issued the citations according to procedure. They argued, and the families had violated legitimate ordinances. What they hadn't expected was the depth of evidence compiled against them. Judge Martinez called the court to order, his voice carrying the weight of authority. This hearing will address multiple citations issued by HOA security officers Henderson and Rodriguez. Given the number of cases and the similarity of circumstances, I'm consolidating them for efficiency. Attorney Santos stood to address the court, her opening statement clear and compelling. "Your Honor, these families stand before you today, not as violators of city ordinances, but as victims of systematic discrimination. The evidence will show that Officers Henderson and Rodriguez have selectively enforced minor regulations to target Black families enjoying public spaces, while ignoring identical behavior from white families." The prosecution's case relied heavily on the technical violations recorded in the citations. Henderson took the stand first, her testimony mechanical and rehearsed. We responded to complaints about noise violations and unauthorized assemblies. The citations were issued according to standard procedures. Santos's cross-examination was methodical and devastating. Officer Henderson, in your report, you state that you received multiple complaints about the Johnson family's gathering. Can you provide documentation of these complaints? Henderson shifted uncomfortably. The complaints were received verbally through our dispatch system. Are verbal complaints documented in your system? Yes, they should be. Then you should be able to provide timestamps, caller information, and specific details about each complaint. Can you do that? The silence stretched as Henderson realized she had been caught in a fabrication. I don't have that information with me today. Judge Martinez leaned forward, his expression stern. Officer Henderson, are you telling this court that you issued citations based on complaints that you cannot document or verify? The cross-examination continued, revealing more gaps in the officers' stories. Rodriguez's testimony contradicted Henderson's on several key points, and neither could explain why they had targeted specific families while ignoring others engaged in identical activities. When Santos called her witnesses, the courtroom heard a different story. Mrs. Chen testified about her daily observations of the park, describing how she had never seen Henderson and Rodriguez cite white families for similar gatherings. I walk through that park every single day, she said, her voice clear and confident. I've seen birthday parties, family reunions, and graduation celebrations. The only families I've ever seen cited are black families. The video evidence from Shayla's phone proved particularly damaging to the officer's case. Judge Martinez watched as Henderson clearly stated that the families were violating noise ordinances, while the audio revealed that the music was barely audible above normal conversation levels. Margaret Williams took the stand as the final witness, her dignity and eloquence commanding the courtroom's attention. Your Honor, I'm 73 years old, and I've seen discrimination take many forms throughout my life. What happened to my family at that park wasn't about noise violations or unauthorized assemblies. It was about officers who couldn't tolerate seeing black families enjoying themselves in a public space. She paused, looking directly at Henderson and Rodriguez. These officers saw our joy, our children's laughter, our music, and our unity, and they decided it didn't belong in their park. They used their authority to try to drive us away, to make us feel unwelcome in a space that belongs to all of us. The impact of her words resonated throughout the courtroom. Judge Martinez called for a brief recess, during which he reviewed the evidence and testimonies presented. When court resumed, his expression was grave. After carefully reviewing the evidence presented today, I find that the citations issued by Officers Henderson and Rodriguez lack merit and appear to be part of a pattern of discriminatory enforcement. The testimonies and evidence clearly demonstrate that these officers have selectively targeted black families for minor violations while ignoring identical behavior from other community members. The judge's voice grew stronger as he continued. Officer Henderson, your inability to provide documentation for the complaints you claim to have received is particularly troubling. Officer Rodriguez, your contradictory testimony raises serious questions about your credibility. Both of you took an oath to serve and protect all members of this community fairly and equally. Yet the evidence suggests you have failed in that duty. Henderson and Rodriguez sat in stunned silence as Judge Martinez delivered his verdict. I hereby dismiss all charges against the Johnson, Williams, Thompson, Davis, and Martinez families. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into the citation practices of the HOA Security Department and requiring mandatory bias training for all officers. The courtroom erupted in applause as families embraced each other, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. Marcus Johnson, who had been sitting quietly beside his mother, looked up with wide eyes. "Does this mean we can have birthday parties in the park again?" Judge Martinez heard the young boy's question and smiled. "Son, you should never have had to worry about that in the first place. The park belongs to everyone, and every family has the right to celebrate there." As the families filed out of the courtroom, local news crews were waiting. The story of the discriminatory citations had gained traction on social media, and reporters were eager to cover the victory. Margaret Williams, now recognized as the unofficial spokesperson for the affected families, addressed the cameras with the same dignity she had shown in court. "Today's victory isn't just about dismissed citations or overturned fines," she said, her voice carrying across the courthouse steps. "It's about affirming that public spaces belong to everyone, regardless of race or ethnicity. It's about ensuring that our children can play, celebrate, and exist in their own communities without fear of harassment." The news coverage sparked broader conversations about discrimination in public spaces and the need for accountability in law enforcement. Henderson and Rodriguez were reassigned pending the investigation, and the HOA Security Department faced increased scrutiny from community oversight boards. 3 months later, Willowbrook Community Park hosted its first annual Unity Festival, organized by the families who had fought the discriminatory citations. The event brought together community members of all backgrounds, featuring music, food, and celebrations that reflected the neighborhood's diversity. Marcus Johnson, now 9 years old, served as the honorary host, his joy infectious as he welcomed families to enjoy the space that had become a symbol of justice and equality. The festival became a testament to the power of standing together against injustice. What had started as harassment during a child's birthday party had evolved into a community movement that strengthened bonds between neighbors and ensured that public spaces remained welcoming for all families. As the celebration continued into the evening, Margaret Williams stood beneath the same oak trees where her family had been cited months earlier. She watched her grandson play with children from all backgrounds, their laughter echoing across the park without fear of interruption. The music played freely, the families celebrated openly, and the park truly belonged to everyone. The victory had required courage, determination, and unity, but it had delivered something invaluable: the assurance that justice could prevail when communities stood together against discrimination. The citations had been dismissed, the officers held accountable, and the park reclaimed as a space where all families could create joyful memories without fear of harassment. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the oak leaves as families began packing up their celebrations. But the spirit of unity and justice would endure long after the festival ended. The battle against discrimination had been won, but the commitment to equality and fairness would continue to guide the community forward, ensuring that no family would ever again be targeted for simply existing joyfully in public spaces.